Um, Last week we looked at some basic JavaScript stuff using the console in the Chrome browser. So it's a quick reminder, if you have the Chrome browser open and you want to try some of these things, you can open the console by hitting Command, if you're on a Mac, Command and Alt at the same time, and then hit J, and that will open the console. If you're on a Windows, you can hit Control Shift and K at the same time. That'll open the console. Either one, if you don't want to use a key command, you can just click on the Chrome menu, go to Tools, and go to Developer Tools. I just closed it because I already had it open, but usually you'll see Developer Tools. And then if you're on a different page, like this is the Elements page where it shows the HTML and CSS, you can just click on the console up here. And if you don't see the console, if it looks like this, let's go back to Elements. If it looks like this, there's these two little arrows that open this menu, and that's where you will find the console, or you can just open up this window a little bit wider, and then you'll be able to see the options here. I'm going to increase the size so you guys can see it, but you obviously don't need to do that. And we're going to talk about different things that we can write in our code. So last week we mostly worked with numbers. We did some really basic expressions. We did stuff like 1 plus 1 and 2 times 2. But there's a couple other types of information in code that are important to know about. One, which is the really like the foundation basis of all code, is the Boolean expression. And this is something that's true or false. So it only has two different possibilities. So that's a Boolean expression. It's either on or off. And this is a sort of like representation of basically all digital data. You've probably heard like zeros and ones before. I'm sure you guys have heard that phrase. That like literally refers to how data works on the computer, where it's all just these little transistors that are either going on or off, and there's like billions of them. And by making these really complicated, circuits that have lots and lots of these little transistors going on and off at the same time, we can communicate these complicated things. Um, so Boolean is just on or off, or sometimes, like in JavaScript, we say true or false. So that's a sort of basic type of information, like 1 or 2, we have true or false. Um, so in JavaScript, sometimes we want to know if two things are the same. And so we use what's called a Boolean operator. And we're actually not going to use these a lot for like another week or two, but we'll just look at them for a second. So a Boolean operator looks like this. There's two equal signs. There's also a version with three equal signs. This is basically just determining how similar these things are. And we'll go into that more a little bit later. But if we want to compare two values, if we want to say 1 is 1, then that's going to be true. If I say 1 double equals 2, that's going to be false. So again, in a couple weeks, we'll use this more. Right now, we're not super worried about this, but we can get these values, these true or false values, by doing certain types of operations and comparing different things. You might say, is this level 1? If it is, load in player X and bad guy Y or something like that. So computer programs are constantly making choices about what should be happening in the program, and this is the way that we make them with true or false values. So we can also do comparisons of value. So like 3 is less than 4. For that, I'm using the left pointing angle bracket, or the less than sign, which is on the comma on the keyboard. So it's a shift and then the comma. If I say 99 is greater than 100, that's going to be false. So you can see the 99 value is not greater than, so we get false. That statement that we just made, 99 is greater than 100, is not true. We can ignore that little error. There's also less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. We're going to skip this and keep going because we're going to talk about this more later. With our numbers, so we looked at a bunch of numbers. There's two types of numbers in programming. There's a lot more actually, but as far as we're concerned, there's two types. There's whole numbers, or integers. So those are numbers without fractions. Like 1 is a whole number, 100 is a whole number, 1 million is a whole number. Is that a million? Yeah. Um, Fractions or floats are numbers that have like a decimal, or a little bit after the whole number. So 3 divided by 4 gives us 0.75. That's a float. So in programming, we call them integers for whole numbers, floats for fractions or decimals. We can check what type of data we're looking at. There's this thing called type of, and we're not going to use this a lot, but if you're curious, you can say, okay, what is this? What is type of 1? It's a number. What is type of true? It's a Boolean. What is type of hello? This is the next one we're going to talk about. It's a string. Okay, so those are the three basic types. So if we want to know what type of something is, we use type of in JavaScript. Okay, the third one is a string. This is just a sequence of characters. So we most often use strings to represent like things that sound like language, like hello or goodbye, or colors like blue or yellow. But the computer doesn't see them that way. It just literally sees them as like the letter I, which actually has a number. It has a number value to the computer, but it shows I to us because it's like those, people understand letters. It's the letter I, then it's the space. It's like literally space is like part of the string. So if I write I am a string, that's a different value than I am a string. A space is a character in the sequence. Even though we see it as emptiness, it's actually a character. And we can compare strings. I can say I am equals I am, and it's going to say that's false. Those aren't the same strings. So it's just a string of characters. They're bound by quotation marks. So you start with a quotation mark on one side, you write as many characters as you want to, and then you end with a quotation mark on the other side. And we're going to use this a lot in our code for colors. That's the main thing that we'll use it for, is colors that we want to use in our drawing. Um, okay, one last little thing. We're not going to do a lot of things with this semester, but everything else that's not either a number or a string or a Boolean in JavaScript is basically this thing called an object, which is just this like collection of a bunch of crap. And we're not going to use it a lot, but I just want to show you guys a couple things that you can do with it. So one of the things that we have built into JavaScript, remember that we're communicating between the browser and our code. So there are these things called objects. For example, there's this thing called the navigator. And this is just this object that the browser kind of gives us access to if we want to do things with our browser. So inside of our objects, we have like lots of little things called properties and methods. And if we want to know something about our user, we can say, okay, what's the navigator.user agent? And this is going to tell us what kind of computer is running our program. And that's really useful because if you have a program that runs differently on a laptop or a desktop or a Mac or a PC or a phone or a tablet, you can figure out what kind of computer they're using, and then you can change your program to fit the right style. So this tells us it's Chrome right here is the browser that we're using. It also says Safari, but we know based on the order that this is Chrome. Mozilla is like the Mozilla developed JavaScript, so that's just a JavaScript standard. And then it tells us right here, it's a Mac computer. It's an Intel Mac 1015, so it actually knows which version of Mac OS I'm running. So it tells us basic information about the computer. There's other things that we can learn about the browser. So the window tells us about the browser window itself. So there's a lot of stuff in there, let's see. Well, we can just take a look at, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. If we want to know the width and height of the window, we can say window.inner width. That tells me in pixels how wide this window is here. So that could be useful if you have a layout or design that needs to fit the size of the window. I can say window.inner height, and that gives me the pixel number for that. And then I also have access to the HTML that's being displayed on the page. So if I say document, this gives me an actual representation of the HTML document. So you can see this is my little website for the for this these slides. You can see the menu, the content, all this stuff in here. And if I want to change stuff about the document, I could say document dot body. Let's go into the outline view and I'll say dot style dot background color equals blue. And I can actually use code to change what I see on the page. So that's kind of where JavaScript starts to get useful, is we can interact with the content of our browser. Okay, so that's the end of the little JavaScript intro. And that kind of is just a way of like explaining why JavaScript exists and what it's kind of used for. But the way that we're going to be using it is actually quite different. A lot of the time when you learn JavaScript, it's to do web development, it's to make websites, it's to make apps and things like that. And that's cool, that's useful. But we're going to do more like basic design and drawing. I think it's going to be more fun because a lot of you guys are design students, a lot of you guys are animation students, some of you guys are programmers, but we're going to be doing all of that stuff at the same time. The nice thing about programming is that every program uses the same basic concepts, and those are the concepts we're going to learn this semester. So whether you're writing Wall Street trading, tax software, a 3D, high-level game engine, whatever it is you're writing, you're going to use the same basic core concepts. And so we can teach those concepts while talking about design and animation and interaction, instead of talking about things that, personally I think are more boring. I assume if you're an animation or a design or a multimedia student, you also think it's more boring to talk about like when I took computer science, literally I learned how to make a program to do my taxes. That's like what you learn by the end of the semester. It's kind of interesting, it's not worthless, but it's not the most fun way to learn programming. So we're going to learn art and design, animation and interaction, but we're going to be doing coding. We're going to be programming while we do it. Okay, so I'm